my name is Vanessa. Welcome to my channel. I feel like I have waited my whole entire life to make this specific video, and I was thinking, oh, I only have like 5 videos on this channel. Maybe I should hold off. But no, I feel like being a hater today, right now, because I've seen a couple bookish pet peeve videos lately, and it's got me thinking a lot about just stuff that I've never been able to tell anyone that really bugs me. Because I feel like a lot of these that I'm gonna bring up are things that I don't see people mention that often, and then other ones are things that a lot of people do say that I just really agree with and I kind of want to co-sign. But in particular, a couple of things came up recently and I was like, I need to talk about how much that bothers me. So I thought it'd be fun to do my first ever bookish pet peeves video to let you know what sort of things I just like cannot get behind in a book. I can't remember who talked about this first because I definitely remember someone else talking about this in a bookish pet peeves video, but my first one, and one that I feel like I've felt this way since like forever, is when the banter in a relationship in a book doesn't feel like rooted in anything. It feels like you wanted to give a bantery relationship to this budding couple or something like that because it looks good on paper that they have good banter, but also within the characterizations of each of those characters, them kind of being at each other's throats in that way just doesn't make sense. And then my biggest gripe about it is it's just like not funny. Like it doesn't make sense, and it's just not funny for them to be bantering in the way that they are, and it feels like forced. Especially when this comes from a place where maybe there's like a plot point that happens where all of a sudden our main protagonist woman or whatever is like suddenly like making digs at the main male protagonist, even though it's like completely undeserved, just so that we can keep up that like, oh, this is enemies to lovers, I swear, look, they're bantering, it's enemies to lovers. Where we're at this point in the plot where it kind of feels like left field and a little bit like our main female protagonist is just looking annoying at this point. Like, I just feel like if we're gonna have a banter relationship, I want the two people in the book to genuinely like have good reason to be verbally sparring with each other, because even in books that have like very proper enemies to lovers set up, even in those situations you don't need to have that banter, and especially if it kind of just undercuts a lot of the tension and feels a little bit cheap and like unfunny. That's just something that I notice happening a lot lately. Yeah, I don't know, I feel like that's kind of like one that I don't hear talked about as often, but I think that it's a gripe that a lot of people would have if they really started noticing it, where it's like, hey, not every single book couple needs to have a banter relationship. Like, a lot of times this is sort of like undercutting a lot of important moments between two characters that do have a tense relationship. So I'm just sort of over banter unless it could be like done in a proper way. If you can think of any books that have couples where they banter and it's actually like pretty engaging, I think that you know, on a lot of accounts The Cruel Prince does enemies to lovers really well, but in that case, especially since they're sort of like peers in a lot of ways and in school, and they're both sort of like annoying teenagers in of themselves, like they're both equally as rebellious and hard-headed, it makes sense when they banter. And I also find that Holly Black's sense of humor is just a little bit better than other authors I've seen. So like that's a good example I could say of that working out well. I just find that it's kind of like left field a lot lately. Okay, my next one is one that I think I've seen it on like literally every single bookish pet peeves video I've ever watched, but having every like main female protagonist be so small and so little. Like, I get it because I understand the appeal of having a big height difference in especially a romantic relationship, and then it's like, oh, she's small but she's brave, like how interesting is that? But it's like, it's getting a little bit old to the point where I just don't really like a lot of times when we are making a female protagonist that needs protection enough to be a desirable self-insert, but for some reason, for a lot of authors, that just means she has to be like small and dainty and a little bit like waif-like. And I'm still seeing this. I think it's gotten better, but I'm still seeing this in especially fantasy books. Like, I'm 5'11", so I feel like that's probably why I notice this all the time, but I've always kind of felt like there's something so not main character-like about being this tall as a woman and feeling like I can't be dainty and wanted in some way, I guess. So it's definitely like a projection, but I also think it's just overdone, and a lot of times it's in order to set up this sort of paternalistic style of relationship between a really small girl and this like super massive, crazy, bigger than the door frame type of dude. which just sometimes like optically doesn't actually sound that good when you say it out loud. Despite the fact that I get the appeal of like a height gap relationship, it just feels like, does this really need to be in every single book? More importantly also is, yeah, we still see a lot of like these dainty sort of main female protagonists, but can we start describing bigger female protagonists as dainty as well? Because I don't think that people quite understand that someone being gentle and delicate doesn't even necessarily have to have anything to do with their size or their height or anything like that. I would love to see more big women be described as like the gentle, dainty main protagonist. I would also like to see maybe male protagonists that are the same height or even shorter than the main female character still be seen as like really attractive and mysterious and brusque and, you know, very like this sort of fantasy ideal of a man. And it doesn't really ruin his like allure as like this magical wizard, like curly haired, dark-eyed boy for him to be like slightly shorter than her. I just feel like it wouldn't take away from the story at all if it wasn't that way. I just kind of, that's my wish, is that I wish we could have like different heights and different sizes of bodies. Oh, especially when we get to like a certain description when like he's sitting down and she's like, even sitting down, he's like basically at my eye level. And I'm thinking about that logistically and I'm genuinely just scared for her. Like that's like a very scary visual image that you just threw my way, and I'm not, that one actually freaks me out. I actually find that a bit scary. Okay, this is a short one, but I see this a lot coming up more and more, and I'm seeing a lot of like, we got to see a lot of the Reylo fan fiction kind of being developed into books, which is, you know, I have a lot to say about that in and of itself. I'm now seeing that with Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. Like a lot of these new romance books are like Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce fan fictions essentially. And what I don't like about this is that says to me that these books are being written and published within like 6 months. Like it's taking like 6 months for them to write that whole thing and publish them, which is not surprising for some of these things that's coming out, but it is a little bit disappointing and demoralizing because it's like Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift are too new for there to be a published book about this. Like we need to spend a little bit more time on this one, I would think. But in tandem with that, and I've seen this being talked about a lot more, is with these books that are written about Reylo or Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift, and you can tell that they're fan fiction with names changed. The thing is, you know they're fan fiction. And the Reylo fans that are reading, you know, these Ali Hazelwood books, not that I'm coming for her directly because she's actually like not the worst offender of this, but the thing is, you know it's fan fiction, and the Reylos or Taylor Swift fans or whatever who are reading it also know it's fan fiction because they know those characters, they know those people. The rest of the entire audience of the world does not know anything about Reylo, doesn't know what their relationship is, what the tension is, what the world is like, and why, you know, their particular powers being opposing is actually so impactful. We know that when we're watching Star Wars, because Star Wars has a huge IP with like a trillion comics and TV series and everything attached to it that have built the backbone of that tension in that relationship to be so interesting as it is. But when you're writing a fantasy romance standalone and it's inspired by Reylo, you have to please like take your brain out of your skull for a bit and look at it from an outsider's perspective. We do not know what makes each of these characters so interesting. You cannot just put Reylo into different tropes and then market it as its own unique book when we don't know those characters. Like we've never been introduced to them the same way that you have. And so I don't care if they're in close proximity and they have to share a bed for a night. These are two characters that I've only known for 150 pages, and you've given me absolutely no characterization of them for me to care, because I'm not a Reylo. I don't have the backstory on them. I don't know what makes their platonic relationship so interesting to make this romantic or sexual relationship so interesting. And that's something that I'm really hoping, as more and more people start talking about it, as this trope marketing issue gets addressed, because I love the idea of fan fiction writers breaking into the, you know, pop market, because I do think that fan fiction is a wonderful writing exercise, and so many amazing authors exist just posting on fanfiction.net or AO3 that do deserve to be published authors. But it feels like you are basically writing a book to hit these trope beats assuming that everyone cares about your characters the way that you do because you independently know it's based on your Raylo fanfiction. We don't know that as the audience, and that's why a lot of romance these days, I want to read more romance, but it falls flat to me because it feels like I'm never given a reason to care about the characters before they're presented to me as like a romantic couple. When I'm reading fanfiction, I have empathy for these characters, I have love for these characters, I understand the in-depth like magical world building that has already been established by a team of writers that I'm just not getting from your book, that you need to lay the groundwork for before presenting this couple to me, or else my eyes are just gonna glaze over and I'm not gonna care. I'm seeing a lot of people talk about that right now recently. And so when people are saying that they have a problem with trope marketing, I kind of think that this is what's at the core of it. And it's not so much the tropes themselves, because I think we all like tropey stuff, or at least a lot of people that I talk to do. But this is at the core of it, is that we're not establishing the world properly, especially in romantasy. We're not establishing these characters properly before we're hitting those tropes. And that's just not what makes shipping and romance subplots or anything like that interesting. It's like, it's because we've established things more, which isn't like totally surprising, but it's also like not a precedent that we want to set for all of these romantasy books, that you have to have some like insider knowledge on the fandom that this book is based on in order to pick up a book. If I'm reading the flap in Barnes & Noble and it sounds like a good book, I want to be able to trust that that synopsis is all that I really need to make an informed decision on picking that up. Let's just take a moment. Let's take a beat, okay? I love it. Let's keep writing fan fiction. Let's keep getting that fan fiction published. I love it. Look, I'm with you. Let's take a beat, let's slow down, let's take a beat, let's add a couple chapters, let's make it a duology. Let's do anything we can to make me care about these characters and to make the world building super established before we jump into whatever tropes we're gonna be getting into. That leads me pretty well into my next point, which is that romance plots, I don't know if I'm just older and don't really have the patience for them anymore, or if they're genuinely just getting like faster than they've ever been before. I remember back when I was like getting back into reading in like 2020, there were a couple reels I saw on book Instagram where people were saying like, this is a slow burn book. And they give this recommendation of some like, it's like a standalone romance book. And then someone in the comments was like, it was too slow burn. Like it took way too long for the characters to get together. And they're talking about a book that's like straight up 350 pages. It's like, to me personally, this is my pet peeve and this is my preference. Cause if you like insta-love and you like things to go a bit faster, that's totally for you. I would prefer if we had like a 6-book series and you dragged out that romance and it was like purely platonic for like the first 3 books, and then in the last 3 books maybe there was a couple lingering glances, and then in like the last chapter of like the 6th book of a 600-page book they kiss. Like, cause to me, I lose interest as soon as they get together. And I know that this isn't, I'm not actually alone in this. I know this is a very common thing. I don't know the psychology behind that. If someone can let me know. I want to be dragged along like a rag doll tied to the back of a truck. Like that's how I want my slow burn to feel. Like I want it to be physically painful how drawn out this thing is. If that's not your preference, that's totally fine. I'm not saying all books should be like this, but I just wish there was more. And I'm feeling like there's this pressure to like get to the point of a romance, because I think that, you know, it's undeniable that romance as a genre has been so huge for the publishing industry in the past like 4 years since the pandemic, that I understand the point of wanting to make sure that your first book hits a certain level of like romance involvement, so that when you market it, people don't feel like they're not getting what you told them that they'd get out of it. Maybe there's publishers or authors that don't want to take the chance hoping that people will pick up the second book if nothing is really romantic in the first book, just because of how important romance has been for book marketing recently. I don't really know. I wouldn't be able to identify it. I don't work in publishing, but that's my like assessment of it, is that maybe people are just like worried that no one's gonna pick it up if we don't make the romance happen at the specific pace. I miss when we would go from like these sworn enemies, real enemies, okay? Not like bantery office like rivals, sworn enemies, to like close proximity, from someone having to work with each other, to like reluctant allies, to like begrudgingly helping each other heal, to like finally seeing why they're traumatized in a particular way, but still not really liking them or excusing them, to like one of them kind of groveling for an apology and the other one like still not accepting it. And then that's dragged out for like 4 books until eventually we get to like an actual romance plot. I'm just not getting that anymore. And people are telling me things are slow burn, and they're not slow burn. And I want something that hurts. Like, I really want something that hurts slow burn. I just think, like, I promise that you will get more invested readers if you find a way to initiate intimacy that could be read platonically even. Like, I think that the most romantic thing you could put in a book is intimacy that doesn't even involve physical touch, and making that dragged out for as long as possible. That to me is a well-written romance plot. We're like blowing through romantic milestones in books that we could have waited like a book or 2 to hold off on. Like, we can slow down by like 20 miles per hour, I feel like, on these romance subplots. And that's been really bugging me lately. So, oh yeah, playlists on the front of the page, don't do that. That's me just being straight up a hater. I don't put a playlist at the front of your book. Please don't do it. I probably will immediately close the book and I will never open it ever again. Because I can't stand it. Because I don't think that I'm gonna trust what's about to happen in that book if it has a playlist in the front. Oh, okay, another one. And this has to do with trope marketing again. Just because a story takes place in a school does not make it inherently dark academia. Because if you have a book that is just, the setting is them like vaguely walking around an American college campus, that doesn't make it dark academia. You know what you need to do if you're thinking that you're gonna label this a dark academia book? I need you to get into the trenches and consult someone who was there live on the front lines of 2015 Tumblr, a girl who was wearing her mustard colored sweater and her Oxford docs listening to Vampire Weekend and reading The Secret History. If you're not gonna confront that girl from 2015, because then you're not getting the good intel from the source, okay? You need to get this intel from the source. Like, I want you to consult someone who in 2015 on Tumblr was making Pinterest mood boards for different like Greek mythology gods. Okay, before you call someone something dark academia. That's the person you need to be speaking with, okay? Preferably if their favorite like mythological god was like Hecate. That's who you need to be talking with, because that's the person that's actually gonna know what dark academia actually is and isn't gonna just let you use that as like a trope buzzword when they're just like kind of sometimes like sit in the classroom during the whole story. You know what would be helpful? And here's like a tip. Maybe we need more like college setting books to take place in the 90s or in the 80s, because that's sort of like what The Secret History, I think part of the reason why it works so well is because it was in that era. And it just works a lot better. I don't know, consider that. I'd love to read more books that were set in like college campuses in the 80s or 90s. Okay, here's another one. I think I wrote this really late at night. I wrote, don't describe an outfit to me if you have no taste, first of all. But also, if we're in a fantasy book based on Russian mythology or something and our main protagonist is dressed for an event in like a silver sequin 2014 slim bodycon prom dress from Windsor, we need to commit to the setting. And I totally agree with that. And I'm not meaning to call out anyone's taste or anything like that, because I think that everyone has different styles and I totally respect that. But it's sort of a thing, like if we're at a really important like ballroom scene in a Russian mythology, you know, fae book, I would love to see more authentic portrayals of traditional garments. And I do think this is getting a little bit better, but I fear the resurgence of A Court of Thorns and Roses is gonna set us back, because every time I see A Court of Thorns and Roses fan art, it's always Farrah in that silver tight bodycon prom dress. And I'm just, to me it's tragic, because there's so much we could have done that we just didn't do. This is why I wanted to make this video. So this next one here is inspired by, I recently watched with Cindy's video on hunting Adeline, and there's like this section of it when it's describing a smut scene and it's from the male point of view, and the way he's describing the sex is like it doesn't even feel human. It feels like it's like a cosmic galactic event, and that's something that's always bothered me so much about smut scenes these days. And maybe that's just my view of things, is to me a smut scene that would be really well written would feel human. And to me, I like, what do you mean? What do you mean it felt like going into a black hole and time stopping? I have no idea what that means at all. It starts like feeling like you wanted to add a lot of like super big words in there. I just feel like we're not being grounded in these smut scenes, and that's something that I see with smut a lot, and that's why a lot of smut kind of just like doesn't do anything for me. Like I just don't really care about it, because so much smut is described as these like cosmic events instead of being like a human intimacy moment, which would ground the characters and would feel so much more personal. It's firstly really corny, but also it kind of feels cheap in the writing, because again, like as the reader, I can't relate to it. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that feels like. And this is just something that I see a lot with media nowadays, the kind of like taking the humanity and polishing up sex to a point where it then loses its humanness, and that is sort of like that realm of things for me. I think that people bring that up a lot when it comes to like sex scenes in TV shows, where a lot of like sexiness as a concept feels a little bit too polished nowadays, which then inherently makes it less sexy, since sex as a concept should feel a little bit more like primal and human. And that is like the least human thing that I've ever heard. Unless we're like straight up like doing like alien smut, I want it to feel a little bit grounded in reality, just so that I could feel the connection between these two people is legitimate in any way. My eyes glaze over. Again, my eyes glaze over every time I read a smut scene that's described with those words, because I'm like, okay, this is like just kind of like hokey. This is like hokey writing. Anyway, so that's just my opinion. Those are just my opinions. Let me know what you thought about any of those. If you have a similarly unpopular opinion, if you agreed with what I said, if you didn't agree with what I said, if you want to like kind of tweak my verbiage on some of that, because I'm going off script here, let me know. Especially if you have any romance books that you have any recommendations for slow burn, please let me know. That's the one I want you to let me know on, okay? That's what I actually want recommendations on in my comments, if anyone's gonna comment anything. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed, and I'm gonna go make dinner now. Bye!